go. It's Mbali.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm good. We're so excited to have you. We're so stoked. We've been girl crushing for a while now.
Awesome.
So thank you very much for making the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I was very excited actually when I received the invitation, and I couldn't have said a faster yes to be on this platform.
No, Mbali, thank you. So I just want to just position you a little bit for those who might be new to Mbali. But, you know, one of the things that excites me about what Mbali is doing through her podcast and other spaces is really shining a spotlight on wellness in the workplace. And that's what we really want to talk about today. But in addition to that, let me first start with a confession. I am struggling with this idea that productivity and working seems to have gotten a bad name. And I think it's gotten a bad name because we've done a bad job of balancing being well at work and working hard at the same time.
Yes.
I often hear people calling me a workaholic in a negative light, you know, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm a workaholic. I think I'm just a very productive person. So this is why I think this conversation is so important. How do we balance productivity and wellness at the same time in a world where mental health is so important? But also in a world maybe where we're seeing a slowdown in resilience and working hard and pushing and getting things done. And I'm just keen to see, you know, is there middle ground and what does that actually look like? So Mbali, let me just quickly remind you how Mentorship Mondays work. Unfortunately for me, I don't get to hog you to myself and ask you all the questions I want. It's the community that sends the questions. And boy, have they sent you questions. So I've got lots of questions for you. So if you see me looking away, I'm just looking at my laptop screen here in the hotel. And I'm going to be bringing those questions to you. And where I might be, sneak in a question or two. But the community is really keen to hear from you directly.
Yes.
Okay. So guys, I'm going to get right into it. Before we start with the questions, Mbali, how did you arrive at the place that you realized that this is the conversation we needed to have? We needed to have a conversation about wellness. We needed to focus on the workplace. And why a podcast as a platform?
Yeah. So how I arrived at this concept and this topic was from personal experience, right? Very early on in my work career or my work experience, I experienced workplace bullying. And for me at the time, I couldn't even articulate what that was. I couldn't articulate my experiences, why I was feeling so unsettled, so uncomfortable within that specific environment. And I didn't necessarily have the tools, the insights to make sense of what was going on then. And then it's only when, you know, years later, when I reflected on that actual experience and I reflected on how it affected me mentally, emotionally, and just professionally in terms of how I would position myself and how I would navigate that space, where I realized that, you know, there is a conversation to be had about the workplace, and the fact that there's usually such a separation between who we are at work and who we are in other spaces, that there needs to be an acknowledgement that we show up as our whole selves within the workplace. And those different elements that speak to our mental well-being, our emotional well-being, our social well-being as well, and even financial to some extent, needs to be considered within the workplace, so that we then reimagine and then reshape the environments that we find ourselves in, so that we build, I guess, the right levels of engagement, the right levels of attention, and focus towards the different aspects that you find within an employee. An employee isn't just about coming into the workplace and being productive and performing and leaving. There are other elements that contribute to how they are productive and to how they perform within the workplace. So that personal experience, and I guess all of my workplace experiences, culminated into just this concept of wellness in the workplace. And I mean, I started it off, you know, just as a small series on, you know, my YouTube channel at the time. And I think because of the engagement and the conversations that were happening there, there, I realized that there is then an opportunity to expand on this subject and then to bring in other people who may have gone through similar workplace experiences, or people who have, you know, different perspectives about how to navigate the world of corporate, you know, as a young professional, as a middle professional, to come onto the podcast and to engage on different topics, you know, as and when the topics come up. So that's been it. And I think a podcast allows just for the expansion of the conversation. I think it allows for even the material to live beyond, you know, just one platform at a specific moment in time. And I think, you know, it's been such a great way to just make it more accessible to other people, right? Make this type of information, this type of insights from, you know, experts or industry leaders or experienced professionals that come onto the podcast to make it more accessible, and to some extent provide a platform for some degree of mentorship, some degree of coaching where relevant, and also just some degree of self-empowerment. So that's the background of wellness in the workplace.
So let me I mean, you've said so much in positioning that, Mbali, and I just want to follow up, you know, on one of the most important things that I've heard. You spoke about coming to work whole.
Yes.
How has the whole idea of wellness in the workplace been received in your view? There seems to be a school of thought that used to say, don't bring your problems to work. Number two, you don't come to work to make friends.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Number three, you hear the older generation saying, these young ones are weak. They were almost classified as a young generation that doesn't know how to work. And I'm keen to hear that in the stories that you are hearing on the podcast, does it seem as if the idea of wellness and arriving at work whole is actually taking off, or is there a resistance from corporate and organizational spaces?
Yeah. So what I'm seeing, I guess, at an individual level is that there is a degree of self-empowerment and self-preservation that people are prioritizing. So based on the conversations that I've had with a number of guests on the podcast, especially when I ask the question around what does wellness mean to you? You know, there is a sense of self-preservation and a sense of authorship in their own wellness. And then that translating into how they navigate the workplace or different spaces of their life. So the thing that has been very consistent is the idea of defining what that wellness means to you, and then setting the expectations in your engagement, whether it is with your manager, whether it is with, you know, the organization, I guess, and the structures that you operate within, in terms of meeting and living up to some degree of that wellness within that space. At an organizational level, you see, you know, programs around employee wellness, corporate wellness, but I think that's still very surface level, right? Because just having, you know, mental health Tuesdays, for example, or wellness Wednesday once a month does not really address the root cause of some of the issues that some employees may be facing within the workplace. And it's almost been seen, I guess, as a tick box exercise, and especially post-COVID, right? Where then there was that attention around preservation of employee wellness. But the thing about it is that there's been a direct connectivity to say, we're doing this so that our employees are going to be productive, and so that we can see performance, so that we can see profitability. The conversation isn't, we're doing this for sustainability. Sustainability of the employee and sustainability, I guess, of our organization in the long run. So it's very much about, how does this then translate into our bottom line? How does this translate into our performance as a business? How does this translate into our profitability? Those are the conversations. And I think that's a very short-sighted view and perspective to have on a topic such as wellness, because then it makes it very much, you know, transactional in the engagement, in that, you know, we provide this platform so that we can get X out of you. It's not, we provide this platform because we recognize your humanity and your dignity as an employee, and we understand the importance of sustainability within our organization, and that people really are at the center of how sustainable we can be.
I mean, I absolutely love that. I haven't heard wellness in the context of, you know, the sustainability strategy of an organization. And I think that's really great. I just want to pin this comment so that I can come back to it. Tatum was just commenting now to say, oh my goodness, I'm so excited. This is my master's topic. So Tatum, notes. I hope you're taking notes tonight. And Nicola says, I've actually just implemented creative inventory at work as a means to reciprate or recalibrate, I'm sure, and
Yes.
just audit myself at work in order to be optimal. So I think that's so interesting, Nicole, to talk about auditing yourself. But let me start at the beginning. Today, we really want to talk about how do you be more productive without, you know, working yourself into a place of unwellness, right? And, you know, can those two worlds coexist where you're productive, but also at the same time, you're well? So there was a question actually that that came from Nicole, so that was sent through saying, Mbali, what's your process to be productive and optimal every single day? Because that's where we're going to get the answers. I mean, you're probably implementing your own practices. How do you get stuff done while also making sure that you're taking care of yourself?
Yeah, that's such an important question. I loved it so much when I came across it. So I think for a daily basis, it's important to really understand that each day looks different, right? And understand what your priorities are on a daily basis, because how you show up in the workplace, in your personal life, every single day is going to look different. And I think a lot of people struggle with prioritization. And prioritization for me is at the center of productivity. I don't think it's a coincidence that both those words start with the letter P, because the P in productivity is for priorities, right? So understand really what your priorities are on a daily basis, and understand the time, the energy, and the focus that you would need to dedicate to each of those priorities, so that you are able to manage yourself and manage your deliverables, right? And I always do that in threes, or I've come to do that in threes rather, in the last year or so, after experiencing a period of burnout, by the way. And I realized that it is because I was overemphasizing every single priority or task in my life, and not necessarily focusing on specific areas that needed my time, my attention, and energy at a given point in time. So I'll definitely start by saying, each day looks different, and in each day, understand what your priorities are, because they're not going to look the same every single day. And if you can just keep it at a minimum of 3, right? Anything beyond that, I think, stretches you. Anything beyond that dilutes your attention, dilutes your focus, dilutes your energy, and then ultimately affects the quality of the work that you're able to deliver. So keep it at a minimum of 3 if you can. And in having those priorities, then it's also then about understanding what needs the most energy today, because we are faced with the limitations around time, around energy, and around focus. And when you don't then set, those, I love that comment around important versus urgent, because that's exactly it. And the point that I also just wanted to get to before moving on to the next pointer is that if everything is urgent, then nothing is actually urgent. That's the thing with urgency. If everything is urgent, then you won't be able to get to the things that actually matter. And I think we have such a very casual relationship with the concept of urgency, right? We throw around the word urgent all the time. I mean, I was laughing, to myself this one time when a colleague said, "Oh, this is urgent," but then she kept moving out the meeting from one week to another, even though the subject and the title of the meeting said urgent. So is it really urgent? And also just understanding that my urgency is not necessarily your urgency.
Yeah.
And that's where then the management of expectations then comes into play, which brings me to my second point around how I manage my daily process of being optimal. It's about the priorities. It's about managing my energy and focus in terms of those 3 areas that are priorities. And lastly, managing expectations and communicating to the relevant people that I'm accountable to, accountable for, responsible to, responsible for. Keeping them informed that, guys, this is where I am today in terms of maybe a project, a deliverable, or a task, and then managing that expectation through really clear, direct, and effective communication. So I'll sum it up to those 3 points.
So Mbali, there's been a lot of reaction while you're speaking, and I'm going to try and sum them up in a quick follow-up question because we've got so many questions and so little time. There was a concern around, I think from Nicole, in terms of how do you best communicate those expectations, especially to your seniors. How does that conversation sound where you're saying to your boss, I know that you've said it's urgent, but in terms of my priorities, that's not going to get done today. How should we be thinking about how to actually have the conversation to actually put up a boundary to say, I have actually thought about what's urgent, and I'm going to communicate it to you in a way that actually doesn't get me into hot water.
So it starts with building the relationship first with your manager, because you don't just have that conversation out of nowhere. It starts with having to build that rapport and having a very honest and transparent conversation about your capacity. Also understanding what is important to your manager, because at the end of the day, it really is about making them look good. And so understand what is important to your manager, because what's important to them should be important to you.
Yeah.
And usually, the point that I also just wanted to add to having around your 3 priorities, what you'll find is that when you narrow down your priorities to all 3, it's that it trickles down to other areas of what you need to do. If you focus on the big 3 things that you need to do on a daily basis, it usually has a ripple effect on other things that you need to do. And you'll find that the 3 things that you need to focus on are actually outcomes based, or should be outcomes based, as opposed to be task oriented. Because I think we get caught up in just doing tasks because we need to get things over the line, but we don't really prioritize what the outcome is of that task, because that outcome is the thing that is going to determine your activity. And I think in managing then the conversation with your manager, it's about understanding what that is. So what are your priorities? What outcomes are you trying to get to? And how then can I structure my activities and my tasks on a daily basis so that I deliver those outcomes? And at the end of the day, I make you look good, I get my bonus, and everybody's happy.
So I am so excited because my team is listening.
Yes.
And I feel like you've managed to articulate what I've been trying to articulate for the longest time. I'm like, all I want to see is the outcome. I communicate the outcome. How you get there, is dependent on how you manage your energy, how you prioritize. But can I please have X outcome, in order for us to make a certain metric move? So I'm really excited to hear that. I just want to pick up comment quickly. OT Boy Mama says setting boundaries is very essential. Love that point, because that's when most people start having work stress or burnout, leading to poor mental health. Nontle is giving us an example. Nontle is saying, I want to just make sure I read it properly without losing it. Nontle says Unilever has a menstrual leave policy in place, which allows women to take a day of paid leave if they are experiencing pain or complications during their monthly cycle. And I wanted to say thank you to Anontle for sharing that, because it's just an example in which we can give people space to arrive whole. My husband's company does the same thing. They call it red leave. And if you need to, sign up for red leave, you need to sign up for red leave. Okay, let me pick up more questions, because I think there's so many more coming through. Mandisa sent you a question saying, Mbali, productivity is not just about checking off tasks, but it is about finding fulfillment in our work. How do you define personal fulfillment in the workplace? So, not just working because you've got a to-do list that you need to get through, but working to be fulfilled. And how does productivity, or how you think about productivity, help you more with feeling fulfilled at work?
In the workplace. I think that's such a good question, because we have not prioritized fulfillment in, you know, our conversations around work. It's very much, like I said earlier, about looking at, you know, the individual as a resource, as opposed to looking at the individual as as a human and as whole, right? So in terms of deriving that level of fulfillment, I think it's very important to, like we said, manage then those expectations with your manager, because part of having those conversations is about understanding what tasks bring you a lot of excitement, what tasks bring you a lot of fulfillment, what types of projects would you rather be in, you know, that are going to energize you and that are going to essentially fill up your cup, so that you are able to balance the things that you don't like doing and the things that you actually enjoy doing, and that contribute overall to the productivity, the performance of the team. So I think it's very important then, in building that relationship with your manager, to then express that, you know, I actually enjoy these types of projects. So if there are opportunities where you can plug me in and expose me to this, maybe sometimes it could be over and above, you know, what you do on a daily basis, but sometimes it could be actually integral to some of the work that you do. And those are, you know, the projects that will bring in that level of like excitement, and that will energize you and ultimately fulfill you in your day to day. So those are small pockets, right, of being able to do that. With other organizations, sometimes it does depend on the organization that you work for. You will find that, you know, they have dedicated structures around creativity and innovation, you know, where people are given the opportunity to be invested and involved in, you know, in projects that are new, that are innovative, think tank type of projects, and things like that are actually done with the idea of fulfillment, of employees in mind. Not only does that help with the fulfillment, obviously it helps with the creativity, which ultimately translates into new ideas, new products, new services, and to the success and the profitability of the business. And so in essence of that, I think it is important to just build up that rapport with your manager, so that you are able to then express that these are the types of projects that excite me, that fulfill me, where I can contribute positively. And then, you know, if you are fortunate enough to be in an organization that does have think tanks, for example, or innovation hubs, and you're able to prioritize that as part of driving fulfillment, then by all means engage in that.
So, I mean, Fizz asked an earlier question, and welcome, Fizz, and thank you so much, because I know that you're always, you know, so engaged. And Fizz was saying, let's be honest, there's certain things we don't all enjoy in the workplace. Certain things are energy drainers, depending on the type of person you are and the way you like to work. And Fizz was using the example of saying an energy drainer for him is meetings, for example, or long meetings. How do you handle your energy drainers? How do you, I mean, you spoke about managing your energy as one of your daily practices. What's the trick behind that? How do you think about managing energy, and how do you still show up even in the things that you don't really like or don't really enjoy? For example, I hate an Excel spreadsheet. I want to die every time a client sends me an Excel spreadsheet. But I have to engage with it, and I need to work through it whether I want to or not.
So we have to take it a step back. In managing your energy, it does come with that degree of self-awareness. So you need to understand, what is my energy drainer and what gives me energy? And how can I then integrate that into my day-to-day routine or into my weekly routine to be able to do that? So for me, I think what I've done quite well in the last year or so is just being able to then identify those pockets of rest in between my energy drainers, right? So when I do then have activities or tasks that I'm either not really strong in, those are areas of improvement for me, I tend to spend a lot more time on that, and I tend to spend time first on those, because it just allows me to just, I guess, pour most of my energy into those areas. And then soon after that, I think taking some time to rest, to recuperate, to re-energize. And that's not taking a day off. That's taking an afternoon off sometimes. And it's not an entire afternoon, could be an hour. That is sometimes even having a day in the week that's only dedicated to the things that you don't like. Unfortunately, I mean, if it is meetings that you don't like, that happens every single day. And I remember when, as part of my burnout recovery plan that I had, you know, it was about taking what my therapist and I called as mental health Tuesdays. So I wouldn't take meetings on Tuesdays. And that's something that I obviously had to manage with my different stakeholders. But if I had to try as much as possible to not have any meetings or have minimal meetings on Tuesdays, I did that because that was part of the plan to just manage myself and to recover to a place where I could be productive again, I could be present again, and I could perform again. So based on personal experience, you know, that's where I have integrated those moments of rest, those pockets of just being energized here and there to be able to just sustain myself and to manage, I guess, and have a balance between what takes my my energy away and what brings me energy. And I see Nicole has just said for her, that's her Wednesdays. It's a very practical thing to do, and you might think that, you know, it seems impossible, but it's probably because you actually haven't done it that you think it's impossible.
Okay, so let me be honest, right? I'm sitting here with my leader hat on and knowing my team is on and they're going to be coming at me after this because so for example, we're a global firm, we work all over the world. I'll give you an example. June 16 is a holiday in South Africa. It is not a holiday in other parts of the world, right? So if we have a client meeting, for example, on June 16, we have a client meeting on June 16, especially if the client says, you know, there's no other day that they can take it other than that particular meeting. So I'm having a lot of tension as you're speaking, because I'm like, I can't imagine my team also coming to me and say, Nosy, Wednesdays, me Wednesdays
and meetings, we don't work.
So I'm struggling, but I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm obviously, I want to just not, I'm going to try and pin your comments. When I think about what you're saying, it's really practical, because for me, as an example, I tend to not work from 2 o'clock on Fridays. That's kind of like, you know, I push myself hard for the week, and then I try to have an easier Friday, and hopefully by 2 o'clock I can sort of hang up and say, you know, I'm absolutely done. I'm interested in the courage, Mbali, to have these difficult conversations. How do you meet your boss halfway, where you've said, this is what works for me. If you want the best of me, you've got to let me do my half day Wednesday. Or if you want the best of me, you please don't include me in morning meetings, because that's not where my energy is best used. How do you get the, and I know you said it was about rapport, but I would also imagine it's about building trust and showing that you can deliver when you're given that room to try, right?
Fully agree. So it's definitely about the credibility as well. So you have to build the credibility in the small things so that you could be trusted with a big request like this. It's a give and take, because at the end of the day, I mean, the reality of being at work so that you can produce, perform, and deliver is there, and there is that expectation. So I think if you have consistently delivered and have shown in your delivery, in your performance, that you are able to meet what is expected of you, then having these types of conversations definitely does become easier. It doesn't take away, obviously, for the need to build up the courage, but at least you have data points. You have data points to say, this is what I've done, this is when it was done, this is how it was done, and as a result, can we have this trade-off? Because there'll always be trade-offs. And I think speaking back to your points about wearing the leader hat. So I think I'm also just fortunate enough in the space where I currently am in, where I have a leader who's very mindful and intentional, right? So I'll give you an example. Just last week, Friday, she decided to book the Friday afternoon off because she understands that the month of June is quite hectic for us as a team. And she said in the body of the meeting request that take time off so that you can recalibrate so that you don't burn out. So I think from a leader's perspective, there is definitely that mindfulness that needs to be there, that intentionality, that capacity planning that needs to be there. Because if you do understand the degree of capacity that is required in a certain period, then you can plan around it in order to maximize and optimize your team's deliverables so that you can meet the requirements. So maybe back to that point, I mean, I had a very practical example that happened just recently, and I was so impressed because it was just that level of mindfulness and intentionality, and being cognizant that we are not robots, being cognizant that her team is not made up of people who are robots, and that there are pressures also all around the business that we face. But in order for her to manage those pressures, she has to prioritize the people, and she has to put people at the center. So I'm definitely speaking from a perspective where I am, I guess, in a slightly privileged position where those conversations can be had. But coming back to the point that you're raising earlier about building up that courage, I think courage definitely comes from the credibility. It comes from then you having to show that you can deliver, that you are trustworthy, and that you are able to keep up a degree of consistency in your work despite having to ask for requests here and there. Because the difference between asking, actually, maybe this is a question that can be repositioned this way. What is the difference between asking for an afternoon off because your child has a soccer match versus I'm asking for an afternoon off because I need to just re-energize? I think it's the how. It's the how you have that conversation. But in terms of the level of importance, both for me and my perspective at least are equally important.
And I love the emphasis on re-energize, because as a leader, you should be hearing when this person is energized, they actually can give more into the business and into their role. So that's really exciting. I just want to pick up Nontle's comment here. I just want to see, sorry, Nontle, I'm trying to do more. Okay. Nontle saying in our master's in clinical psychology class, the group of 6 were told that they were accepted because all of them were experiencing a mental health challenge or other. But how, I want to see more. My apologies. It's so long, Nontle. I can't see the whole thing. And my thumb is clearly too fat. There. But how seeing the psychologist, I don't see the rest of it, Nontle. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to send that again. Let me just double track back. One of the things you've said, Mbali, which I think is so important, is how do you build credibility in the small things to deliver on the big things? I mean, I always say to my team, when they come and they ask for exceptions from doing one thing or another. So, for example, I have a team member now who says, actually, Nosy, I don't want to come into the office at all. I want to work from home. And I'm like, that makes me really nervous, because your track record hasn't proven that you can self-manage. But let me trust you. And let's try it for the next 2 months, and let's see how that goes. And if you can deliver on the outcome, then we'll continue. But if you can't deliver on the outcome, then I'm going to need you to come back into the office. And I felt like it was a healthy conversation that we need to learn to have about the trade-offs and meeting each other halfway in terms of what do you need and what do I need from you. So there's no unhealthy tension that then exists that actually makes it harder for you to be productive at the end of the day.
Agreed. And I think it does take then that mindfulness for you as a leader, right? To be cognizant of, a person's track record, how they perform, and then linking that back to some of the requests that they can come forward with, and then making then those concessions where it allows and where capacity priorities also come together. Another point that I actually thought of as you were talking is that it's so important for us to be very flexible in our ways of managing ourselves and managing other people. And I mean, in the process of just redefining what productivity is and what it can look like, flexibility and adaptability are such key themes that need to be prioritized, because like I said, productivity looks different every single day. And you cannot wear the same hat to say, I can only work from home today if the priority, the day, the focus, the capacity requires you to be in the office. It's about knowing and then striking then that balance and then having that flexibility to be able to move things around and to be able to also just, having an adaptable mindset around how you approach your day-to-day work life and how you approach productivity. I think flexibility and adaptability are so key, especially because we're seeing a change in how people work, a change in the ways of work. It does require a lot of co-creation and a lot of collaboration based on what you're able to co-create with your manager, with your leader, and at some point with your organization.
So I've got a couple more questions. Nonhle, can you put your question in the question box thing so that I can see it as one whole thing, and I'll definitely come back to it. But there's something you've said, Mbali, that I just before that I want to reflect on on the point of flexibility. I think we want to say that louder, because I have found again that if both leader and the person being led are flexible, you're far more likely to meet each other halfway. And in addition to being flexible, to be proactive rather than always reactive to burnout. If you can anticipate a heavy month coming up, is to say, store up on energy, take the day or the week, a Friday off before a really busy period, so that you're really able to come at it as much as you can. That's what I do when I'm going to travel for a long period of time, is that I'll take a day before and just completely try and zone out so that I can have the energy to do what I need to do. Premium Hair is saying often people have to call in sick when they're actually not sick, because that's what's considered good enough reason to be off. And then you're asked for a doctor's note, and then you don't have it.
You have to lie.
And then you have to lie. And then you have to make one up, and then you get caught, and then it's such a toxic circle. I think and I think she's making such a good point, though, that no one sees the reason has to be illness. And you made such a good example in Mbali just now, which is, I want to go to my son's soccer game or my daughter's soccer game, and that in itself should be reason enough to be able to say that gives me energy and probably makes me a better worker as well.
Definitely. So I think that also just comes with destigmatizing things such as well-being, mental wellness, emotional wellness within the workplace. There's definitely still a stigma that is present, and that does take a level of just a mindset shift from a leadership perspective, so that they are then intentionally able to create a space where people can come and say that I need time off because I am not emotionally healthy, and to not, well, emotionally or mentally healthy, it depends. And to not then link that to their ability to deliver, to not link that to their degree of competence, and to not link that to their degree of credibility. So it definitely does take some intentionality around destigmatizing things such as mental and emotional well-being, and also then adding to the conversation around seeing people as whole, and not just seeing them as resources that are there to deliver a project and perform and deliver profitability at the end of the day.
So I want to just, Boss Lady One says illness can sometimes be mental, and you can't really get a sick note for it. So there's some reaction to that part of the conversation. I want to just grab a tissue.
No problem.
I'm not feeling too well. And then I want to pick up on a few more questions that have come through. So Musa had sent you a question, Mbali, that says, Mbali, the workplace is evolving rapidly and there are new productivity tools and technologies. Are there any specific apps or tools that you are using or that you would recommend for people looking to boost their productivity?
So I think this is very interesting because yes, the world is moving in a certain direction and we're seeing the uptake of digital technologies. But what the technology is that it is an enabler. It is a means to an end. It's not the end itself. So when you engage with these digital tools, they are adding to a habit that is being built, a routine that is being built. They are not going to create the routine or the habit for you. So I think we just maybe need to just shift our mindset or perspective around digital tools when it comes to productivity, in that what they are is that they're actually enablers. They help you to achieve a certain outcome, and they help you to build a habit or a routine. They will not hold you accountable for the habit and for the routine. So just reframing the perspective around how we engage with these digital tools, I think, is very important. Then secondly to that, I think some of the things around productivity we definitely overlook. And when you really just break it down at a very basic level, it's about building healthy habits, and building healthy habits around sleep routine, around what you eat, around exercise, and also being intentional around what you build in those different areas of your life. So if there are any productivity tools that I would recommend, it would be around mainly those three areas. Sleep cycle, for example. So that helps you, in terms of tracking your sleeping, because we know that in order to optimize, your presence, your performance, your productivity, you need some good sleep, you need some good rest. And we underestimate, the value of having a healthy circadian rhythm that is just going to allow you to then wake up the next day energized and rested, well rested, to be able to show up within the workplace in a healthy way. Eating well. Some of the foods that we eat, guys, they really they're energy drainers. They might taste good now, especially foods that are high in preservatives, foods that have a lot of oil. They might taste good during the day, but that's probably the thing that's going to make you fall asleep after lunch. You definitely cannot be having, not definitely, but it wouldn't be ideal for you to have pap during lunch, for example, because that is just going to make you lethargic and sleepy, and then you won't be able to be fully present and active for the remainder of the day. So just being mindful of little things like that, because I think for me, a major part of productivity has to do with lifestyle. So lifestyle, excuse me, lifestyle and habits that you create around a lifestyle, and that adds to just how you perform, just how you also are able to be present. And I emphasize the point about presence because usually when you're experiencing burnout, for example, or you're tired, mentally, you're not operating at the same level that you usually operate. You experience things like brain fog, you are not able to articulate your thoughts or yourself well. And in so doing, you're not able to represent yourself well, whether it's in a meeting, whether it's in a one-on-one session with your boss, to a point where it does then potentially create a negative perception that you might not want. And that's all because, you're obviously not then prioritizing the things that then help you to become more present so that you can be productive. And it's literally just the lifestyle changes. So if you are going to invest in any digital technology or fancy tools to help with your productivity, let it be the ones around your lifestyle so that you can track that.
I love that. Sleep cycle, as well as eating well. I mean, I'd love to know what other people think of brain foods. The stuff we've heard that pap is not the way to go during the day because it can make you sleepy and lethargic.
But
what are some of the brain foods?
I mean, something very light throughout the day. A lot of greens, obviously. Blueberries. I mean, I did a bit of research around blueberries because they're high in magnesium, and they also just help when you're feeling down or depressed or sad. They help with just restoring your magnesium levels. If you are obviously, in need of potential vitamins that you would have to get from a dietitian, and you would have to get prescribed, also invest in things like that. So very light meals throughout the day, fruits, veggies. And I mean, this is nothing that is new that I'm saying here. It's stuff that has been said over and over again because, yes, someone just said nuts. I think that's very true. Nuts are also very good throughout the day. So instead of getting a chocolate bar, because that's going to raise your insulin levels, and once that sugar rush hits and it drops, you just go back down again. So you need foods that are going to sustain you throughout the day in terms of just energy levels, lots of water, definitely snacks such as nuts, blueberries, bananas, also high in magnesium, and energy booster types of foods, and nothing that is high in preservatives. If it's natural, if it's organic, please do invest in it.
We've got scuffed in culture. Let's be very honest, guys. I mean, the majority of the people on this call have scuffed in culture. And if it's not scuffed in, it's played.
Yes,
you know? So, I mean, how do we unlearn those things? Because I think we can see the picture of the blueberries and the nuts and the magnesium
and it seems
in the
very
banana.
ideal. Yeah.
But the habit, you know, of how do you change that habit so that you are actually more mindful of your scuffed in habits and the scuffed in culture you've built around yourself?
Yeah, I think that's very difficult because the other thing that a scuffed in culture or going to buy a plate by the corner of the street does is that it creates that sense of like community, because you usually do that with your colleagues, right? You usually sit around a lunch table or you walk down the street to go buy a plate whenever you can. And because of that, you obviously then end up just, you know, following things mindlessly and not really being mindful of what that means to you. So I think, yes, it is an ideal. It's definitely an ideal to have your blueberries and your nuts and your, you know, foods that are high in magnesium and are energy boosters. But going back to just, you know, the points around wanting to create sustainability and being sustainable for yourself within the workplace, it's about examining, self-examination, and examining what that looks like for you. It's not to say you also don't have to carry iskaftin and have a plate at all. It's when you do it. It's when you do it, because there are also other social benefits within the workplace that actually start, that add to, the experience of being in the workplace, right? So the social benefits of having your lunch with your teammates, having to go, like I said, go buy a plate with your workmates. So you don't want to completely lose out on that aspect, right? You still want to engage in that, but engage in that with a bit more mindfulness, so that you know what you are prioritizing, what you are getting out of sharing a meal with your colleagues versus, I'll give an example again of just having, you know, a wrap for lunch.
Right.
So it's just about knowing why I'm engaging in this, being mindful of why you're engaging in certain activities for yourself benefit. And also I'm seeing so many comments about food, and that makes me excited. Sorry, that just threw me off a bit there. But yes, eat the rainbow, exactly. Healthy foods, light meals throughout the day that really just contribute to keeping you energized, because that's what you want to get to, right? You want to keep your energy levels consistent throughout the day, and foods that are high in sugar, high in preservatives, that just raise your insulin levels throughout the day without keeping you alert, they're not good. You know, you'll have a sugar crush very quickly, and that's just going to affect your level of alertness throughout the day, because that's also what you want to do. Being alert.
I want to sneak in a comment from Xoli. Let me see if I can read it, Xoli. Xoli says, wellness also gets viewed in different ways for different genders, different ages, different races. Wellness bias. She says, I've just coined that term while typing to make a point. I think that's really interesting, whether we do have a wellness bias and this idea that there are soft people who, you know, deserve to be a wellness bandwidth, if I can call it that, and people that we are less accommodating of. And I can imagine that can be also classist in a way, where, you know, we believe that at a certain level, you need the time, and there's certain, maybe certain jobs that we think asking for wellness is too much of a privilege. I mean, think about security personnel at your organization and how you would view them if they said they wanted to take a Wednesday afternoon to rest and it wasn't part of their shift. You know, I think those biases are probably baked into all of us, Xoli. I don't know, what do you think, Mbali? But I thought it was a really interesting concept.
That is a very interesting concept, wellness bias. I think you should definitely trademark that term because there is that, right? And as you know, you were talking, I was just thinking in terms of you know, being young in the workplace, being, for example, single, unmarried, with no kids. There's already a perception that's created about what you are able to deliver in the workplace because your lifestyle you know, doesn't require you to be as present in other areas of your life. So the bias even comes in things like that, to say, oh no, but you're young, you're vital, you're healthy, and you know, you should be able to then maybe deliver a bit more than your colleague with 2 kids and, you know, responsibilities as a wife, as a mother, etc. So I think the wellness bias even comes with such demographics where we then look at someone's lifestyle habits or lifestyle criteria that then determines what we think they're able to handle, what we think they can deliver based on a perception that has then been created and has not been examined and interrogated.
Right.
So whether you are a leader, whether you are a manager, whether you are a colleague, I think it's important to have that degree of examination and to try to minimize then the assumption on who wellness belongs to, on what wellness looks like, and also understanding that wellness looks very different for different people because we value different things, right? And if there's something that has been consistent on the podcast, when I get to ask my my guests about, you know, what does wellness mean to you, it has consistently been different for each and every single person, which speaks to what they believe in, which then ties into their value system. And so excuse me. And so I think in us having to just combat that wellness bias, it's about being mindful then of that wellness looks different to different people and that we value different things. And so in so doing, we should be then more cognizant of how we engage with what someone may need to become well in the workplace.
Sure. I think that's really, really interesting. You know, how those biases can creep in. Premium is asking another question, and that is, how do you remain productive in the midst of unproductive colleagues?
Sure, it's hard. It's hard, especially if the culture of the organization is also quite maybe slow and relatively unproductive. And I think it's so then important for you to identify once again, what are the things that make me, you know, energized? What are the things that excite me? And to focus your energy on that. But in so doing, I think it's important to not then overextend yourself, to not to overcompensate for colleagues who aren't living up or meeting their deliverables. So yeah, I think it's important to just not overextend yourself and to just be mindful that, you know, of the culture that you operate within, because sometimes it's a team culture, sometimes it's a result of a manager, you know, who isn't productive and maybe just, you know, shifts work to his or her subordinates. And because of the culture that's created then within the team, then everybody just follows suit without interrogating and examining if that actually works for them. And I think then in so doing, collaboration with other teams potentially who are, you know, higher performers, who are more productive on certain things, building that sense of allyship outside of your immediate team, you know, with people whose skills, whose, you know, expertise that you would want to lean on. Definitely also do that. I think that's the value of working, you know, in big or in big organizations or in just organizations, in that you're able to draw on different skill sets, different expertise from different people to just help you in terms of maintaining maybe a certain level of personal productivity and personal goals, so that, you know, you don't also just fall into the slump, because it's very easy to do that.
Yeah.
To fall into the slump, and to just adopt the culture within a specific team, or an environment that then affects your personal goals, aspirations, and overall work ethic. You definitely don't want to do that. So if you are able to draw on different people within your organization, build some form of allyship and exchange of expertise and skills, things that stimulate you, energize you, by all means do that.
I absolutely love it. We've got 2 minutes left. I want to steal 1 minute to talk about our upcoming TEDx Durban collaboration, but I want to steal 30 seconds for a final question from Laura, which is, how do you balance working full-time and studying?
Priorities. I think know what your priorities are, manage your relationships, manage expectations with the people that are around you, because I think a lot of, you know, relationships or areas in our lives that then fall prey or victim to us not giving them attention is a result of unmanaged expectations. So in you having to be clear about what your priorities are, communicate that with the people that are around you. So the people that you are accountable for, accountable to, the people you're responsible for, responsible to, manage those expectations. And also, you have to make trade-offs. I think at different stages of our lives, we need to be comfortable with the idea that we can't be all things to everyone and everything. So we will have to make trade-offs as and when required. But also, as part of making those trade-offs, how you manage those relationships is through effective communication, so that, you know, when you are in a different season in your life, you still have a healthy community around you.
It all comes down to good comms, good conversations. It comes down to courage, always, trade-offs. Mbali, thank you so much. You've been you've been absolutely amazing. I mean, these are all my notes I was taking as you were speaking. And it was absolutely worth taking this Mentorship Monday in my hotel room in Lusaka, in between travels. I just want to say a big thank you. Before you go and before everybody goes, I just want to say, guys, remember, if you're in Durban on the 31st of July, we're having a live Mentorship Monday in collaboration with TEDx Durban. It's a big deal for us. So if you are around, please let us know. And please buy a ticket. It's only 350 rands, and we'd love to see you there. 25% of the tickets are already gone. So please, let's make the other 75% count. And if it works in Durban, TEDx Johannesburg, are you listening? We're coming for you. All right. Cheers, guys.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Bye.